Hi Dave, welcome back to the Mate Night Podcast. We're ranking every film ever made. This is episode 5, Full Metal Jacket. Should you watch it? Fred, tell us a bit about this movie.
Thanks for asking, Jamie. It'll be my absolute pleasure. Full Metal Jacket is considered a classic of its genre and one of the defining Vietnam War films. Released in 1987, Stanley Kubrick's penultimate film focuses on the experience of a selection of US Marines during the Vietnam conflict. A fractured film, Full Metal Jacket is split between two rather distinct stories with not too much overlap, save a couple of characters. The first half presents the basic training period for these recruits. Then after a short time skip, we follow events in the field for two of the Marines who had previously been acquainted with. Like some of Kubrick's earlier work, Full Metal Jacket explores the psychological impact of war on both the individual and the group's psyche. Amongst other things, it is most readily appraised for its accuracy in depicting the experience of the soldier from training to field. And for many, it is not only one of cinema's archetypal war films, but it is Stanley Kubrick's final great film.
Very nice. What was his film after that?
Eyes Wide Shut, which...
Not very good.
Have you heard of it?
Nope.
I think it's kind of mixed. It was released posthumously. I don't know how much of it... Yeah, I don't know how much of it he did before dying.
Okay.
But I think it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag.
He turned up.
Yeah.
Once or twice.
It's also like a weird erotic film.
Is it?
I haven't watched this.
Okay. Well, we'll keep on track. So today we're going to rate this film in 9 categories and then take the average. The first 2 categories, how much Fred enjoyed it and how much Jambo enjoyed it. So, Full Metal Jacket, a Kubrick Vietnam War classic, rated out of 10 by the Mate Night Podcast. 3, 2, 1, go.
7.4.
8.0. Okay.
Yeah.
Yours is lower than I thought. Okay.
Yeah, really.
I'm kind of glad.
What made you think that?
Well, it's a bloody good film, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So go on. Let's hear it. I'm more surprised by.
Yeah, I did like it, and I guess we've spoken about this before. 7 is good. You know what didn't work in its favour? This score we do now, the gut reaction really is, as subjective as it gets for us. And we're talking about a Vietnam War film that I watched last night in between football matches and doing loads of work. And I just couldn't like really enjoy it.
Okay.
And I tried to take that into account, but I just think I wasn't really feeling a heavy Vietnam film. And,
Okay.
there was a lot of death, a lot of war. The last one we did, Apocalypse Now, I had a similar reaction to. So I don't know, maybe if it's just not a genre that I have a particular affinity for. But yeah, obviously it's a good film, but it's not like, I wasn't like, I tell you what, I would have needed to see something that made me say, wow, you know what, that's so good that it's taken me out of my mood.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
I'd have probably given it more benefit of the doubt.
You could argue a good enough film you don't even need to be in the mood for because it's so well made.
Right.
Does it really need all the right environment and the right context and everything? If it's that good, then surely just you sit down and that's it, then you're glued in.
Yeah, exactly right. And you don't look... I didn't do it any favors, but still, like if it was that special for me, I would have given it more leeway in other areas.
Yeah, okay. No, I like it. I think 7.4 is a fast score. Yeah,
8.0 then. That's pretty decent.
Yeah. Well, I've got a few things that I did want to touch on with it at some point today, but basically for me, it was it was a lifeless plot. There was nothing to follow. It just felt like we were aimlessly wandering around, sometimes one person's life, mostly Private Joker. It just kind of felt, but so you've got this complete lack of a plot, really, as far as I'm concerned, where anyone's really trying to achieve anything. But everything else, as far as I was concerned, was very, very good.
Right. So it kind of, the packaging was great, but the great driving force.
The great driving force, which on writing my review for this film and all the other stuff that I prepared, has become clear to me how important it is to me to have a good driving force, and also how important the distinction is for me between the driving force of a film and then all the other details, and how they're kind of almost two completely independent things. And so you can have a film that has such a powerful driving force that you can kind of forget about the other things, and then you've got this where there was nothing pushing it forward. Nobody wanted anything. Nobody was trying to get any revenge. No one was trying to achieve anything. No one was being curious. No, like, it was just following random people. But all the other details were right. There were no really dumb moments. Well, probably were, and we'll probably go through them.
Potentially, yeah. All right, well, talk to me about some of those details then. Which ones saved it for you and gave it that good score?
Well, I tell you what, I really like it when a director manages to balance realism and kind of creative, artistic moments. Do you know what I mean? I feel like Apocalypse Now did it as well.
Which is what you really want from a realistic film. Is we don't go into it watching we're not there to watch a documentary, right? We're there to actually see someone imprint their vision. Which
exactly,
you got whatever the shortcomings with the plot or the force behind it. It's some brave decisions as to how he's gone about it. Like it's an atypical film, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. But you talk about some of the details. You asked about some of the details. It was absolutely fucking hilarious at moments, and then like half an hour later, it was horrifically shocking. And that kind of thing happened quite a lot throughout it, and I kind of felt like there was a lot going for it, And another element of it as well was the immersive realism in that equilibrium felt right to me. I actually kind of felt like it wasn't so stylized that I couldn't grasp what it might have actually been like for the vets.
You know what's really interesting about that point, and it's something that I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it then, is how similar it is in concept to one of my favorite books, Catch-22, which the point behind that, or one of Joseph Heller's points in that, is the randomness and bizarreness of war, seemingly having these massive consequences without any real point. And so Catch-22 is like the funniest book I've ever read. And the way, without giving any details away as to the plot, the structure of the book is odd. It's a war film. That one's set in World War II. There's just a lot of similarities with how Full Metal Jacket works, where there's stark contrast between randomness, bizarre situations, bizarre behavior, and things that you just don't expect to see. Everyone actually being a touch mad and just being all right with it. And then in Catch-22, what they do is essentially about maybe 3/4 of the way through the book, it's a series of stories that are increasingly ridiculous, covering characters that are incredibly bizarre and how they interwove in this kind of Second World War setting. But then about 3/4 of the way through, all of these characters are still in play, but there are a series of more shocking events that take place. Lots of death, lots of horrific scenes. And there's such a juxtaposition between what you've seen in the first 3/4 of the film. Like, it's the first book that made me like audibly laugh out loud a lot as well.
Great feeling, that.
Yeah. And so then you get that big dichotomy going forward. And this has that exact same feel. And I didn't pick up on it, but they're both war films and both, I guess, a message there. There's lots of similarity in the message that they're trying to espouse.
Yeah. And the same goes with Apocalypse Now as well. I think they're probably, I think that they're all trying to touch on the absurdity of war, aren't they, a bit? And perhaps maybe what we need is somebody to come out of a film where it's like, no, war's great. We love war.
Yeah. We need
someone needs
different.
To mix things up a little bit. Oh yeah, it's absurd. Yeah, like we didn't know that. Come on.
Yeah, what we need, I think the thing is, you get a bit tired because there's so many versions of different films and TV. Like we mentioned 3 there, where they try and emphasize the humor, the banal nature of war, almost to kind of shock you into going against the grain for all the war films that are tragic. But because we've had so many now that are also going against it, I don't know, maybe it didn't work in Full Metal Jacket's favour that this is like the last in a series of similar sort of feels.
The absurdity of war. And then specifically, I felt like Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket were very, very similar movies to me.
Yeah.
Just artistic interpretation of the absurdity of the Vietnam War. Except from Apocalypse Now actually had a story. Like Apocalypse Now actually had a series of events that felt intentional and coherent rather than just like... I'm reluctant to even say following Private Joker because a lot of it wasn't following.
No, he really became a main character in the second half, didn't he? He was a character in the first and then became the focal point after that.
Yeah. I don't mind. The word you used was quite good, fractured. I don't mind it being fractured so long as at least either they both independently have something pushing them forward or even ideally, really, they have... something we're trying to achieve for this 2 hours. One of the things that I mentioned in my review is, I could have left the film an hour early or an hour later, and I kind of would have just felt no different about it. If you'd have just continued the story for an hour or you'd have cut it off an hour earlier, it would have felt the same to me. There was no like, if you cut me off an hour early, I wouldn't go, damn it, I didn't get that result I was looking for.
Well, I specifically did do that as well.
Yeah,
I watched
exactly.
a football film in the middle of this, and I must say, exactly the same thing. I was waiting for, in my head when I put it on, I was like, there's a chance I don't watch this game if I get really invested, and I wasn't. But I knew a bit about this film going in, as I typically would about the old films, and I think although I was enjoying how it was packaged, there wasn't enough difference from what I knew for me to be like, okay, I'm really, really invested here.
Yeah.
Having said that, and we did allude to it, we've kind of shat on it a bit there, but part of the stuff that was really, really good was really good. Like the whole, like the drill sergeant, I think if I picture that without knowing anything about this film, like, let me ask you, how much of this film had you seen before going into it?
How much I'd seen the drill sergeant moments. Mm-hmm. That's it. But I could not believe how many lines I was like, I've heard that line before. I recognize that line. Like so many of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Very iconic role that is.
Oh my God, it's amazing. And I think if that had been something that we'd gone into and not known anything about, that would have really elevated the experience.
Well, I kind of didn't. I was literally sat there. I was watching it with Faye, and it was laughter at what he was saying, but it was that kind of laughter where you're like, I cannot believe that this is what is going on. This is not what I was expecting at all.
In which way?
How hilarious his insults were. Like, he was objectively so funny. Like, he was such a funny drill sergeant. I was just creasing, but the insults were absolutely brutal.
And my understanding is how much of that was improvised as well is just wild.
It's up for debate, but supposedly he was a career drill sergeant, and supposedly Kubrick. Some people say he completely ad-libbed his lines, and some say that's a bit of a misconception. But the really amazing, the thing that makes it so iconic is it's so obvious that this guy just embodies this character that he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of it like that as well, but Kubrick was known to be an absolute
meticulous perfectionist. He was excruciating to be on set with.
Yeah. And so I'd always heard that he was like, the drill sergeant was a consultant who came in. And for anyone who hasn't watched this film, like, basically the first half ends up being, in the training camp and with this drill sergeant. And so all of those scenes, my understanding previously was that he was like a consultant who came in to help. And then they were like, he came out and said, look, this is how I do it. This is the story. The Hollywood story is that he came out and said, this is how I do it. Tore everyone a new one with lines that were just impossibly funny and outrageous. Kubrick couldn't think of anything better, and so he just decided to hire him in the film. Obviously, that sounds like it could be a bit of up for debate how much of that is complete ad-lib. Like, he's a very substantial part of the first half of the plot. So whether all of his lines are ad-libbed, you wouldn't have thought so. But there's definitely some level of
supposedly he had an unheard of involvement in the scripting of his character, the dialogue of his character. No other Kubrick film, the actor has that much involvement in the words that dialogue is. And apparently, whether it was ad-libbed or improvised, it was very much largely down to that actor. So, well, we don't actually have much time left. We're really squeezing stuff in. So I do want to ask a little bit about two things. Firstly, what were your favorite parts about it? Obviously, there was the drill sergeant, but is there anything else?
So I think I must have seen most of the first half of the film. It's about 45 minutes, really. Because I remember stopping it when it basically ended, and it was well under an hour. And I had definitely seen a lot of those scenes before. So although that probably would have been my favorite part of the film, in hindsight, I just felt it was too familiar for me. So I would say that the stuff that I found myself most pleasantly enjoying were out in the field Vietnam War shots. Like, I don't think you ever get tired of that sort of stuff, even if you don't like that genre of film. It's just something about it is almost, it's a real stylized,
it's fascinating,
way of doing it. And all those films that we've watched that's set in Vietnam during that period, they all have a bit of a similar flavor, or they have things that they all say, from the soundtrack to the kind of tracking shots, and even, you know, the material and
well, it begs the question when Apocalypse Now came out in relation to it. Can you see it's on the screen?
79.
Should be quite near the top, I think.
79, yeah,
and
87 for Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, so they're quite far apart.
Yeah, it's a bit,
considering how similar for me they were as.
Well, something I found really interesting when I was just writing up that little intro to it was that it was not only 1987, but his penultimate film.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, me neither. He made like 13 films, so he didn't have a very long, filmmaking career. I mean, it was long, but he took his time in between films near the end. And I knew Eyes Wide Shut was maybe a bit, you know, not his best.
Yeah.
But Full Metal Jacket is known as one of his best films, or is a really popular film of a great collection. And I was surprised that it was that late on in the day for him.
Yeah, yeah. I reckon that, here's my theory on why your score was lower than I expected. Okay. And it's mostly built off of what you've said already. But the film is fractured, and really the thing that sets it apart from other films is the first part. Mm-hmm. And if that bit has been, if there's no novelty to that at all,
that's a great point.
Then you're only really the only novelty is the second part, which really doesn't stand out that much, as far as I can tell, from any other film. It wasn't like that special, part two.
Yeah, I think for me, the enjoyment of part one has been exhausted by my years of YouTubing.
Of the clips.
Like the first time I almost remember the first time I saw film compilations with the drill sergeant in, just being like, 5'9", I didn't know they stack shit that high, and being incredibly enjoying, what is this? Finding out it was ad-libs. And
there was some.
You look like the sort of man who would fuck a guy in the ass and not even give him the goddamn common courtesy to give him a reach around. I'll be watching you. I've seen them all so many times but the first time it was like just pure enjoyment.
It's hilarious. That was my experience. You know that was a line that Kubrick had shouted cut immediately afterwards. Asked him what a reach around was. He had to explain it to him. Then he went, "Keep that. I like that," and then just rolled it again. And was like, "That's staying."
Just some weirdo asking what.
Supposedly that was one of the ad libs. Yeah, supposedly. So I mean, I think if part one, the real standout bit, which to be fair should have just been a movie on its own, if that hadn't have been spoiled for you, it would have definitely been.
For sure. If I was looking at this, and this is a difficulty with classics that we end up watching, is that we find out about them through pop culture over a period of time.
Well, so not me.
You don't.
Yeah, I said I recognized some of it. That's not true. I'd seen the drill sergeant before. I knew he shouted at people. But when I was watching it, I just could not believe.
I'd heard of a reach around. And I was like, he must have invented that. Yeah, I think that for me then, all these classic films, I you know, a part of the mystique around them has already been ruined for me. So
So perhaps
I
what
think
we'll
if
see
I-
is the new films that we
The
start
new
doing
films will start
do better.
getting good scores.
Your ratings will be like Planet of the Apes that we've got in a couple of weeks, higher than Full Metal Jacket.
But this is why it's good that your ratings balance out. Because
You don't want my rating to balance out. I don't know what I'm fucking doing.
Yeah, but I think if you were in 1987, the new Stanley Kubrick film's coming out, and you were like, okay, I'm going to watch it, and the first scene you saw was, okay, not the first scene, they get their heads shaved.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the song is.
That's credits.
That's it.
No one gives a shit.
Whatever.
I wasn't even looking.
They get their heads shaved, and then I wasn't even watching. And then the next thing you hear is him clopping down the stairs and just shouting at all of them. I'm not going to do the impression again,
That
but
was
yeah,
brilliant.
unbelievable.
Absolutely, and just how much of it I got. Didn't he have a great singing voice as well? Like when they were,
I don't know.
yeah. Oh man, he was loving it. I feel like he sung a lot more than he needed to.
Yeah,
I don't feel like a drill sergeant. Part of the process of getting that job requires you to sing that much. I feel like that's...
when he was singing "Happy Birthday," and I was like, "Who's this going to be for?" It was like, "Happy birthday, dear Jesus." the only moments where he showed his humanity were when referring to the good Lord. But yeah, I think that it would have been much more enjoyable having not known about all of that stuff. But still, you got to tip your hat and appreciate that it's a very adventurous effort on his part, and that the shock, whilst we don't appreciate it, or whilst I don't appreciate it, is still,
adventurous on Kubrick.
Kubrick's part.
Yeah.
I don't think it's adventurous on the drill sergeant.
Well, I thought the second, I thought that the second part was a bit dull and lifeless, and the only thing that really went for the film, the thing that really made the film stand out, was the adventurous bit, the first 45 minutes.
Well, which is something that, funnily enough, because I knew much more about the first half is clearly way more famous.
Yeah.
Whatever you read
and
about
way
it.
better.
Well, that's the thing. For me, I probably enjoyed the second half more because I knew.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know much about it.
Yeah. But you're
I
wrong.
enjoyed it out
It's
of
just-
I more enjoyed it out of surprise. I didn't enjoy like if I look back, there's a reason why I knew so much about the first half and didn't know anything about the second half.
And if
It's
I
because
know
no one
something
gives a
about
shit
it-
about the second half.
Exactly. It was, for me, it did nothing to set itself aside, the second part, at all. And actually, should you watch Full Metal Jacket?
Right.
Here's one of the only times I'm going to give an answer that's not yes, no. Yes, watch the first part and then just turn it off. Just don't bother watching the rest of it.
First part is
That's a
8.5.
film. Yeah, that's a good film in and of itself for 45 minutes. Enjoy it.
Well, that's an interesting one, yeah.
And then just turn it off. You don't need to watch the rest.
Yeah, you've seen the rest so many times.
It's just a something and nothing Viet film with no plot, no driving force, which you know how important that is.
That's true. It must have been fairly disappointing to have that electric an opening 45 minutes to a film if you're watching it for the first time at the cinema and then just treading the same water as you've seen in any other war film over the course of the longer part, really, the next hour and 15.
Okay, so one question that I thought I would quickly like to ask, a yes/no question.
Yep.
That might become a bit of a recurring thing. Do you think people only like this film because it's old?
Elaborate then on.
There are some films, like Citizen Kane, where if no one told you it was old, you'd watch it and go, what the fuck is this? This is rubbish. And people like it because it's old.
Okay, I get you. All right, so if you took this film and had it and showed it now,
Yeah.
would anyone like it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I get what you mean. Citizen Kane, no way. But
People might have to ask about
part of the reason for that is because Citizen Kane set the groundwork for all the films to come, and it's
But that's
very
the
odd.
question. The
As we
question
know.
is, do people just like it because it set the grain for people to eat, or whatever the fucking phrase is?
Yeah,
I don't care
it's quite clear.
I don't care who lays the wheat, Fred. It doesn't matter to
Quite
me.
clear. The Citizen Kane, Citizen Grain, they used to call it. Yeah. Full Metal Jacket. No, I think it would be fairly enjoyable now.
I agree. I don't think that people like it just because it's old.
I like that.
I think it's a question that there will be
the classics.
I might not always ask it, but I don't think it's worth asking on new releases. But
do people like it because they're old?
Because we only have time for we are already 7 minutes over. Do you know the other film we've done that came out in the same year?
What year was it? 87. I reckon. Princess Bride.
It was.
Yes.
Princess Bride. Princess Bride and Full Metal Jacket came out the same year.
That's a belter
that's
of a
so
year, that.
weird, that, to me.
And neither would have been nominated for Best Picture.
I think it got one nomination for the Oscars.
Screenplay, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I looked at earlier.
It's based on a book, you know.
We were thinking of adding a segment called Fred read the book.
Fred did not read the book. Fred
read another book, and then he talked about the other book.
Fred barely watched the fucking film.
Yeah, I think 87 then. Good year. Very good year. I mean, the only two films I know from it off the top of my head are those two, and they're both absolute, well, one of them is a belter, and the other one is Full Metal Jacket.
One of them has a 45-minute, one of the greatest films I've ever watched, and then the rest of it is just like sort of dangling off of the end of it.
One of them is arguably the best 45 minutes of stand-up you've ever seen.
yes.
Book ended with a war film.
Bookended with a so-so war film. Right. It's time to move on to our segment section. We have 4 things we thought would be interesting to discuss today. Segment 1, Full Metal Jacket plot explained. 2, how realistic is Full Metal Jacket? 3, one thing I would change. And 4, why Full Metal Jacket is the greatest film of all time. So, starting with number 1, Full Metal Jacket plot explained. Fred, why don't you walk us through the plot of Full Metal Jacket and we can try to make sense of it?
Sure. Now, the plot of Full Metal Jacket is split in 2, as we've discussed. The first half was something that Jamie prepared, I believe. And in the second half, there's a big split. So if you want to go through then the main plot points from the initial start of the film through to 45 minutes in, where they go in the field, and we can discuss not only what happens, but maybe what the directors were going for and what the meaning is behind those.
Excellent. You ready? You got the list in front of you?
No, I got from the second half.
Oh, you actually... Oh, sick. Right, okay. Hang on.
You prepared the first half, didn't you?
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to sort out the timer. Yeah, I did. Okay, so... Full Metal Jacket plot. If you're looking to understand it, like Fred says, you want to think about it in 2 major parts. The first part is the boot camp.
Yeah.
The boot camp begins with shaving the heads and introducing the main characters. Those being the gunnery sergeant, Private Joker, and Gomer Pyle, and how those two got their names. Gomer Pyle, do you know what that is? Do you know where that came from?
I knew it was a reference that I didn't know.
That's exactly it. Okay, great.
What is it?
It's a reference that I don't know.
You set me up as if you were going to answer that. Someone
a reference. It's a reference to some guy who's out of place and naive and dumb and all that. And it's an insulting name. It's actually from a spin-off series, although I didn't recognize either of them. So nice. Moving on. So yeah, you start off, you get introduced to the main characters. You've got Private Joker, who for some reason starts like quoting John Wayne.
Does a John Wayne impression throughout.
But okay, so throughout maybe it's a character thing, but why did he do it in that scene?
Terrible idea.
What the hell was he thinking?
First scene.
It wasn't even funny.
First scene we're shown the drill sergeant comes in, as we've spoken about before. He's rattling off a series of insults. He's obviously been to this rodeo before. He's insulting every single member of the new recruits.
Very well.
Very... The minute he steps in the room, you realise this guy is not to be fucked with in a battle of witty repartee. This guy is dropping some unbelievably quick, well-timed references and sharp zingers. And for some reason, Private Joker goes with he just from the other end of the room does a John Wayne impression, which is a bad impression.
And there's no reason to do it.
Absolutely, there's no reason whatsoever for him to do it.
No one around him laughs.
Yeah, no one laughs.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we got Joker, we got Pyle,
and because of this, he's referred to as the Joker.
He's referred to as Private Joker.
He does this a lot, by the way.
And then he just continues to do it.
Whenever he does this John Wayne impression, people laugh. It's not funny.
It's a sympathy
It's a
laugh.
bad-
Everyone's being very kind for a Vietnam War film.
Yep.
Because it's not funny and it's not very good. Then, so you've introduced all the main characters, and then really the sort of plot of the actual 45-minute movie that you get given starts. And it's basically the brutally demanding boot camp training. It's too much for Pyle. He's trying to do the physical activities. He's trying to climb over stuff. He's trying to keep up with them on the runs. And the drill sergeant is what I can only assume is kind of putting the kind of pressure on him that he might experience in a battlefield. And that's kind of the reason why he's putting that level of pressure on him. It becomes too much for Pyle, and basically the rest of the squad ends up getting punished. That's kind of where the plot begins, really.
Yeah, and up to this point, what Kubrick is making quite clear to the audience is that Pyle, through several plot points or through several scenes, Pyle is expressed to be basically like a childlike character. So during the initial sequence, when the drill sergeant is shouting, outside of Joker doing John Wayne, which, by the way, he gets hit, he gets physically assaulted for by the drill sergeant and shuts up thereafter. The only other one who has any sort of lack of straightforward, just abiding by what the drill sergeant says is Private Pyle, and he's got a very childlike grin on his face. And he's just can't stop himself from laughing until
hilarious.
He's literally, yeah, very funny. We were laughing, he was laughing. It was a great time. Until he got choked in the throat.
He choked himself.
Until he had to choke himself. So then throughout, he exhibits a real struggle doing any of the physical activities, as Jamie said, but also they represent him as a childlike figure. So he struggles to abide by any of the rules. When he is punished, it's kind of emphasis on him being like a kid. Like he has his thumb, he's told to have his thumb in his mouth and walk behind people with his trousers down. At one point, the scene that Jamie refers to, when there's the switch to other people getting punished, it's because he's stolen a jelly donut and he's not.
Hilarious.
And he's not locked his footlocker. So all of this, the whole first segment is building up to basically the turn in his psyche of us trying to make people ready for war. And Kubrick, my interpretation is he wants to show how the machine works, mostly because a lot of these people end up being, real killers. They do get finely tuned to being ready for war. But the outliers who are either enlisted through conscription or have stupidly decided to join the army, they're going to basically be more of a danger going forward.
A very good summary up to this point. So Pyle's been failing. Drill sergeant's been picking on him. It's kind of showing the humiliation and the difficulty. And then Pyle has a turning moment when they all hit him with bars of soap.
Yeah.
Now, Fred, I have a question for you, mate. How painful do you reckon that was?
Well, you by the sound of it, you're thinking not very painful.
Not painful at all. It's soap in socks.
Nah, I gotta disagree, man. That's a hard bar of soap.
It's a bar of fucking soap is what it is. Do you know what the other films put in socks when they hit people with? Like snooker balls.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. In the Mafia.
But it didn't look painful at all. It literally didn't look... Oh, okay, fine.
They haven't made up that punishment. People did it.
I'll be brutally honest with you, mate.
It's not because it felt like feathers.
I wouldn't then subsequently go down the route that Pyle goes down.
No, I'll give you that.
I wouldn't take it that badly. So Pyle gets basically the rest of the squad gets punished for Pyle's let's say, how would you describe it? His
inadequacy.
That's exactly the word I was looking for. And the rest of the group turns on him. This really, I think, is the moment where you start to see Pyle become the duality of man, the evil Pyle, the thing. This is really the trigger,
which is a theme throughout the duality of man, and is even explicitly referenced by Joker, one of the characters later on,
which is a really, really cool moment. Then Pyle gets introduced to the rifles. He's decided that he's going to kick ass, and the drill sergeant introduces the rifle training by saying, look at these 2 terrorist attacks. How great was their shooting? They were Marines. That was his logic.
Yeah.
And all the while, the cameraman is getting closer and closer to fucking Pyle's face as he's looking absurdly evil and nobody notices.
Yeah.
So basically at this point, what it's saying is Pyle's he's been turned on. He's, it's not looking good for him. And now they're putting a weapon in his hands. Here's how this has gone in the past.
Which he keeps talking to, by the way.
Which he keeps talking to.
He's like, when no one's looking, he's like, oh, you're a pretty little rifle, aren't you?
Yeah, it was weird. I was trying to figure out if it was weird or not. I don't...
Oh, you're a sexy little rifle.
The thing is, I mutter to myself when I work. Right? I kind of like, oh, I'll do this.
I go,
ooh,
that's a sexy
no,
little
yeah. And if I'm ever working on a rifle, what a shaft you've got, And then, so he's trained on the rifles and he starts to demonstrate some level of competency.
Oh, yeah.
He starts to look like he's really turning things around.
Mm-hmm.
The drill sergeant doesn't do a hell of a lot to encourage this. He points it out at one point by saying something like, maybe we found something that you don't suck ass at.
Yeah.
But, it's fine. That's his job. And then we get to graduation day.
Mm-hmm.
So up to this point, we've had Pyle, who's been, the pressure has been piled on top of him.
Nice.
And then they popped him with a bunch of soap. So all the... No, that's not how...
I was waiting for you to explain a different scene when they popped him.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
They all took turns.
Pyle's pressure builds up. He turns crazy. He gets good at guns. He graduates.
He does graduate.
He gets put into some division, which I was kind of looking forward to seeing him in action in. And then we get to the greatest scene I've seen in a very long time.
You loved it, did you?
I thought it was freaking awesome. Yeah.
Sick. Nice.
I loved the turning crazy Pyle. I loved the stakes. I loved the way the drill sergeant's character behaved.
What is your major malfunction?
Yes. Like he didn't really look in the least bit scared or like he just was a very cool. Every character did their roles perfectly for me to enjoy that scene.
You could see how he just didn't think that he was going to do anything based on like the kind of relationship between kind of a subservient and dominant force in a relationship, and he just didn't think that this guy was going to crack and thought, I'm just going to pile more abuse onto him, and then he just shot him, and it was
I respected that a lot from the drill sergeant with a gun pointed at him to just double down, just keep going. That's a man who's been at war. That's a man who I cannot.
Can you imagine if he'd have actually taken it and given him the gun?
Yeah,
shouted him off to bed and just gone, holy shit, that was fucking, that was close, wasn't it?
So Pyle kills the drill sergeant, and to be honest with you, as sad as I was, I don't think that first part of the movie would have had nearly the impact on me that it had if it didn't have such a crazy twist. I didn't see it coming, at all. I didn't get the fact he was going crazy or evil. I was just like, why does he look so like... Okay, I didn't like his acting, okay? Right. A lot of people probably aren't going to like that take, but I thought he well overplayed everything. And so when he was pulling that angry face, I just kind of wasn't quite sure what he was doing.
Yeah, it's very, it's... Well, I was about to say, it's clear he's doing an angry, crazy face, but you literally just said, I didn't know what he was doing. So I get what you mean. I think that, I guess they're playing on the childlike.
Which I didn't get.
Yeah, he's supposed to be a kid, right? Basically a kid in an adult's body. And so when he goes mental, it makes sense for him to be that overt.
Yeah.
But sometimes people, you know what people are going for and you still don't like it. So,
I didn't know what he was going for. The whole thing was just wasted on me. Like, I just completely missed it. That's not Kubrick's
probably
fault.
Added to the twist.
Yeah. He came in and he was like there with a gun looking crazy. I was like, God, he's looking a bit crazy, that guy. I just completely missed it up to that point. But anyway, I digress. They've graduated. Pyle's killed the sergeant, and then he blows his own brains out.
Good.
And
that's cool.
That brings us to the end of the movie. Thank you very much for listening.
It would have been a great short film, wouldn't it? That
It would have been the best short. It would have been one of the best films ever, and it would have been a short film.
So we'll rattle through the less interesting part of the story then. So following that, we have a bit of a time skip and we go in the field. Joker, who was kind of a secondary character in the first half. So we spoke about Pyle and the drill sergeant, who are the main sort of protagonists, antagonists, or all the main pillars of the first half. Joker, he sort of helps out Pyle. He is a bit of... He has a weird scene with Cowboy where they insinuate that he wants to shag his armpit.
It was a sister one, eh?
Apparently that's slang for, I want to shag your armpit. That's right.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I was like, why would he say he wants to stick his tube steak in his sister? So then I looked on Urban Dictionary, or I looked on moviequotes.com or something and said, what did that mean? It's like, oh yeah, that's a term for homosexual relations between a man and an armpit.
I missed a lot from this film.
Yeah, well, you know how some of the certain lines were just a bit odd, jarring.
Yeah.
But that one, I was like, what is that?
I just thought there was a sister we hadn't met.
No, I thought, well, that I thought that initially, and then I was like, well, why would he?
Yeah,
he's never met his sister.
Good research.
So then I checked, and it was like, because it also came at a time where they were like, this guy's really crazy. Then you think, oh yeah, he might need to get Section 8. Shall I shag your sister? Didn't make sense.
What? But
I like your sister.
But the new interpretation, which is this guy's crazy. He talks to his weapon. Can I fuck you in the armpit?
Well,
that's okay.
This guy's crazy. Let's Section 8 him. Do you want to get diggy with it?
That's not. Please tell me you've never tried anything like that.
It was an awkward pause, and then he was just like, "Let's have gay relations." So I thought,
is that how it usually happens? Is it?
My experience. We say that person's crazy. No, I need to stop talking about gay stuff on the podcast.
The Mate Night. Welcome back to the Mate Night podcast.
So anyway, Joker he's a character who potentially shags an armpit in the first half. Then he becomes a journalist for Stars and Stripes, which is a propaganda magazine in Da Nang. We essentially follow his in the field experience after that. So journalist in a low risk environment at first. Then we have the Tet offensive that happens, which was quite interesting.
Important historically.
Yeah. Did you know much about the Tet offensive?
Not much, but I'd heard of it.
Same here. I mean, I knew when they started talking about the Tet holiday, they probably was going to not be as sunshine and rainbows as they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, they essentially say, oh, we're hearing rumours that there might be something going down at Tet, which is obviously a Vietnamese important holiday season where there's usually a ceasefire. And the officer who's in charge of Stars and Stripes goes, they say this every year, no chance. And then the most famous sequence of the whole Vietnam War happens where they essentially struck loads of different bases, and the Viet Cong struck loads of different bases. So we have that. Following that, they go out into the field. So this is Joker and his kind of lackey, who's another journalist who is a private rather than an officer.
Seems to know each other from home, maybe.
Yeah, I think he was. I don't know if he is. I think it's just that Joker's a sergeant now, so he's got this lackey in. And then they go over to see Cowboy.
Yep.
So they end up going out into the field with Cowboy's troop.
He's sent out into the field because he's prattling around too much. And
yeah,
so the guy goes, okay,
almost.
you know what? You're going to the front lines. Go have a look.
And during this, he has like he has the peace symbol on his lapel, whilst also having a helmet on that says "Born to Kill," which is throwing up a lot of antagonism from his higher ups. And that's when he mentions this Jungian duality of man. I was kind of going for the duality of man when he gets questioned on it.
What does the duality of man mean when he's referring to that?
So, look, my understanding of Jungian psychology is not. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but
I'm disappointed.
So you have, I believe, the idea is kind of Jung went into a lot of the rationality in the subconscious and the animal versus the id. And
shadow.
Yeah, the shadow. And so basically what you're in control of and what you're keeping at bay, I think. Okay. And so duality of man as it pertains to Full Metal Jacket is subliminally shown, although quite obviously shown in the first half, and then it's referenced.
Yeah,
Maybe a tiny bit heavy-handed, but he specifically references it as, in his instance, Joker's instance, he's referring to, I've got the peace symbol here, which is really getting popular traction back home. Vietnam War, people are wanting it to end. But I've also Vietnam War. The Vietnam War. people want it to end. The Vietnam War. Well, a bird, about the bird. So that was
okay. So the duality of man, as far as I was aware, basically is just the kind of seemingly self-contradictory phenomenon that man can both have evil and good inside of him. I think is that kind of in line with what you were saying a little bit?
Yeah, I guess that's
with the peace symbol and the born to kill.
And we have examples throughout the film. So obviously the example of Private Pile. We've also got Animal Mother being kind of an animalistic killer who also is very protective near the end. One of the videos I watched was really good. You might have seen it as well. Was kind of a character study on both parts of the film, and he refers to Animal Mother as a really good visceral example of this duality of man.
Okay.
You think of him as this animal, he's almost the most rotten of the bunch, but when he's initially presented, his maybe closest compatriot, 8-Ball, says, oh, you want him with you in a fight.
Yeah.
And then he ends up being the one who really does the most to rescue, not rescue people, but he is the one who actually goes out of his way to do almost like, I don't know, this guy argues not the moral thing. He just does something that is not in his self-interest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's an interesting example. Anyway, they go out in the field, Tet offensive, reconnection with Cowboy, who's another Marine from the start. And then essentially through a series of unfortunate events, Cowboy, who's kind of third in command, his two leaders in the group get killed one by one. And Cowboy ends up manning the group that they're going with, the squad, and they're out in a kind of Hue City offensive in Vietnam, trying to recover this city, and throughout that, they essentially get kind of taken out by this sniper. Cowboy dies, rough death for Cowboy, and the whole coming full circle of the plot is Joker's coming to terms with, I guess, the immorality of war or the payback nature of war when he sees his friend die in his arms. And all he's focusing on is Animal goes to him, let's go after this sniper who's taken out a couple of our crew. And he doesn't think like, okay, we need to preserve the pack here. Let's go for revenge. And they go, take out the sniper. The sniper itself is a kind of child, younger, maybe a teenage girl. Yeah. Part of the Viet Cong, but all in all,
clearly a child, which is really the point. And
what happens? The final part of the film is him coming to a decision once they've almost killed her. They basically get this sniper and get her into a corner and surprise her. He almost kills her, but then his gun jams. He almost dies. He gets saved by the private who he brought on at the start, the journalist. And then it becomes a decision of, do we kill this?
Do we execute? Do we see her off?
Do we
finish this job?
And he makes the decision that the moral thing he thinks to do is actually kill her. And again, it's sort of one of Kubrick's films on war seem to have a lot of, there's no good and bad, really. It's people and their interaction with morality and how they navigate this. And I guess it's up to you to decide what would have been the right thing to do.
There's that rich complexity of the characters where they're not, Captain America. Do you think you could have done it?
What, killed her?
Finished off the kid at the end.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
You reckon?
I was like, give me that gun. Don't you worry.
Yeah, I think if someone's saying, at the end, she's basically praying and then she starts speaking English and goes, shoot me.
Yeah. Yeah, she won't. You're doing her a favour, man.
It depends if I killed anyone at that point,
No.
It doesn't.
No. You haven't killed anyone.
Right, that's the question. No, it doesn't depend.
No.
All right. So I haven't killed anyone.
You've never killed anyone. This is your first kill. This girl very nearly killed you. She's clearly about to die. No one else is going to see her off. She wants you to kill her. Do you reckon in the moment you could look someone in the eyes and light-hearted chat for the Mainline podcast?
Could we like punch her to death?
How is that better? How is that better?
What about if we all got some bars of soap with a bit of sock, just smacked her in the head until she was dead?
That would take forever.
I'd like to say that I could.
Yeah.
I think it's hard though if you're there.
Nah.
Nah.
I can't believe how long he took over it.
I was just going, kill her!
Just get on with it, man.
Kill her!
What's he waiting for? Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, plot, what would you say then?
Yeah.
Is what were your main takeaways from the story? From a Kubrick perspective, what do you reckon he was trying?
What do I think he was trying?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was definitely... I think he was trying a lot of different things, and that was perhaps one of the things that made me enjoy it slightly less.
Yeah. Very
obviously the duality of man.
Okay.
And we got to see that through Private Joker and kind of the moments where he showed compassion and things like that. There was definitely a sense of him emphasizing the youth in the Marines. Mm. He was clearly trying to say, like, these are not much. The guy, Private Joker, and the ones who have to execute this sniper at the end are not even that much older.
Yeah,
they're all kids, and it's emphasized with the Mickey Mouse song at the end.
Yeah, that's a cool point.
So there's definitely a lot of that going on. Duality of man, absurdity of war.
Some of the duality stuff, it wasn't even necessarily duality of man, but he did have points where it was clear he was going for, you know, when we spoke about the absurdity of war versus the horror of it, he had a lot of dueling points, I guess, where there were two very conflicting ideas at play at once. For instance, like the glamorization of war, it was very interesting that he decided to make them like a journalistic troop, or to make Joker journalistic. So he could basically showcase how they were thingying the war, the propaganda they were using in the war, but also the responses of the individual people in the war. Like, they were doing these horrific acts and they were being quite jovial about it, because the fame element of it plays at the horror in people's psyche. Yeah, so when the minute the cameras got out, they're all smiles and jokes. You had that example where there's a pit with 20 dead Vietnamese in it, and the officer that they are interviewing keeps like saying something, oh, it's so horrific, and then every time the person takes a picture, he like does a cheesy smile. So and it was very obvious that they were going for something like that, and so it plays into what we spoke about, Catch-22 being the conflict between the absurd and the shocking, but also things like the glamorization of war, obviously duality of man. They kind of hit you over the head with that. It seems like he was really trying to show war as a conflict that's more than just through armament.
So like you said earlier, I think it's difficult because it's, to me, that there's nothing new in any of those themes from what hadn't just been done in like Apocalypse Now and, like you said, in Catch-22.
Yeah, that's true.
It was kind of the themes felt they felt nuanced, but they felt nuanced in a way where it was like, yeah, okay, we've kind of done this before. Yeah,
that's true. It did feel, even speaking about it then, felt like I was doing like a year 11 English essay where I was like trying to find stuff that was there seemed like there wasn't much subtlety in it. Like, you didn't have to go out your way reading about what he was trying to say. Yeah. Like, if he was talking about duality of man, he literally had a guy come up and say, I'm going for the duality of man look. Yeah. Whereas I guess great art is one that for me, in some of the classic films that we look at, It's stuff that you read about and you find out more, things that you
So
didn't
true.
think, different perspectives.
Depth that's not obvious when you first see it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it takes much more reflection and research and things like that. And it didn't really have that much of that.
No, but I think that great film for the first 45. That's what brings it. That's the new stuff that was brought to the table here, and the rest of it is kind of treading water that you've seen in other war films.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once again, seriously overrun, but you know, we're learning. So we're going to move on to segment 2. Segment 2: how realistic is Full Metal Jacket? Okay, so I've made a game, Fred.
Yeah,
It's called "Did I Just Make This Fact Up?"
yeah, nice.
No, it's not that. Don't worry. It's called "Is It Realistic or Not?"
I prefer the first time.
I have 10 scenarios from Full Metal Jacket, from the craziest drill sergeant moments
Okay.
to the harrowing death scenes. Fred, you're going to guess whether they're realistic or not. If you get 8 or more correct,
Ooh.
you get a Mate Night token, which can be spent on any challenge for me of your choosing in a future episode.
Okay. We've been
time.
speaking of some challenges as well, so I've got some ideas.
Yeah. But 8 out of 10s are high. The stakes are there.
So I need to get. So you're going to say 10 scenarios, and I need to say if they're true, they're realistic or not.
You'll see in the question.
Okay,
It'll be clear. So question 1. The military press lied about the number of kills in their paper for propaganda. Was this realistic or not?
Realistic.
It is not unusual for governments to manipulate media and information during wartime for propaganda purposes, so this scenario is plausible, realistic.
Nice. Let's go.
So that's kind of the I thought I'd start off with a nice easy one. Keep track of your score, because I'm not going to. All right? And no fibs.
I think I got 8.
No fibs, because
Is that realistic or not?
Question 2.
Yeah.
During the battle for Hue, was the urban environment realistic or not?
Yes.
Hue had no tall apartment buildings, and they were packed together closely. The buildings which featured in this scene were sparse and taller. This was a result of these scenes being shot in London, and so whilst the overcast sky was accurate, the depiction was not realistic. Right. Not looking good, Freddie. Yeah, so that was shot in London.
That's where that is interesting.
And the tall buildings and sparseness, right, which is why the sniper had such an advantage, was not a thing in Hue. Right, so you wouldn't have just had a sniper with like a massive courtyard with no cover and just one tall building. It was all like little huts and short buildings. So, very important thing that they got kind of wrong there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think when you said what was the question? How realistic was?
No, we're not going back. No, we're not going back.
All right. I'm going to leave a comment.
I'm the quiz master.
I'm going to leave a comment. About
I'm the
that
quiz
question.
master. During the battle for Hue,
yeah,
the soldiers would continuously fire their weapons on automatic without aiming. Was this realistic or not?
So in the film, they would do this. Was it realistic? Without aiming. It seems pretty counterintuitive to do that, but I'm going to go realistic.
The spray and pray shooting style, where soldiers fire their weapons without aiming carefully, did occur in some combat situations, especially during intense firefights, and so this is realistic.
Nice, let's go.
You're on 2 out of 3. Question 4. One guy was seen unloading bullets from a helicopter onto civilians. Was this realistic or not?
Well, I reckon the civilian part maybe, but they're in so many films. Did they have the things really? Did they really have machine guns coming out of helicopters? Not realistic.
What question are we on for? There were instances of civilian casualties during the Vietnam War due to mistaken fire. There were also, unfortunately, civilian casualties as a direct result of indiscriminate fire. And so I have gone with realistic.
Out of planes?
Unfortunately, Fred, that's the answer. So I noticed you were focusing on that. I don't know. Is the honest answer?
Yeah, you're probably right.
We'll go with realistic anyway.
You've done the research.
It was in Apocalypse Now, so...
Mm-hmm.
When some soldiers were shot, they would lie on the ground shaking. Was this realistic or not?
Not realistic.
If an individual is under circumstances conducive to shock, they may suffer from involuntary spasms. being shot falls under this remit. And so this is realistic. So how many do you want at a minute?
I've not got 8.
Oh, no, really? Okay. Question 6.
Got to keep going.
Soldiers were trading goods and services with locals in Vietnam. Was this realistic or not?
Realistic.
During the Vietnam War, soldiers often engaged in bartering with local Vietnamese civilians, exchanging various items such as cigarettes, food, clothing, and other goods for services or local products. This practice was a common way for soldiers to obtain items not readily available through the military supply chains, and so this is realistic. Question 7.
Yes.
The Marines marched to a Mickey Mouse song through the war-torn street. Was this realistic or not?
Realistic.
Whilst wrong question. Wrong answer. This scenario is more likely a creative choice for the film rather than an accurate depiction of military behavior during Vietnam, and so it is not
more
realistic.
likely.
But I'm the quizmaster, and I'll deduct points. Question 8. A camera crew spent considerable time interviewing members of Marines in an active war zone. Was this realistic or not?
Realistic.
Whilst documentary filmmakers would venture into Vietnam, they would not conduct interviews in an active war zone as this would be unsafe and impractical. Fred. As such, this was not realistic. Right. Question 9. The drill sergeant screamed in the faces of recruits. Was this realistic or not?
Realistic.
Ronald Lee Ermey, who played the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket, was actually a career drill sergeant himself, and so famously, most of his lines were his own insults. Although it certainly was the case that drill sergeants varied in intensity, this demeanor can be considered realistic. The final question, question 10.
Oh, this is for 8.
This is for 8. The drill sergeant was allowed to strike Private Joker in the privates during the Vietnam War. Was this realistic?
Oh. Not realistic.
Assaulting an individual is illegal in any capacity, included in the military and including the drill sergeant. However, unsurprisingly, the further back in time you look, the more they were allowed to get away with. Supposedly, during Vietnam, depending on your military branch, unit, and commander, there might even be guidelines in place regarding how to physically discipline recruits. And so the answer is
grey area.
Realistic.
I would say a lot of grey area.
So I think that was a 7.
Maybe a 7.
You just missed the 8 there, unfortunately. Thanks for taking our listeners on such an exciting ride. And I got 4.5 minutes of content out of all of that.
Great facts that were presented there.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to research, to be honest with you. I will be honest. The integrity of the quiz and how thorough it was and the whole definition of realistic and things, you know, I imagine people won't be very happy with afterwards, and we'll get a lot of it.
I'm not happy with it, and I'm the only one.
I'm the quizmaster, and so they can shut up.
I'm Fred. I'm the quizzy.
I'm Fred. I know more about the Vietnam War.
I am writing a strongly worded letter to my MP about the integrity of that quiz. No, that was cool. Some of the facts. Which one were you most surprised at?
I was surprised to hear that assaulting an individual is illegal in any capacity. I thought maybe they could still just punch them these days. You know, it's like they used to hit kids with the cane. Like, so maybe just in the military it'd be fine. But no, apparently that's a big no-no. You would get court-martialed for that, even as a drill sergeant. Camera crew spending time in the active war zone. I was like, yeah, they probably would turn up occasionally.
Yeah, that looks realistic.
Yeah, it could have been, but my research said it wasn't.
It said it might not have been.
So I went with no. This is a hard quiz. Yeah, probably the only other one that was quite interesting for me was the urban environment thing, you know, because that played such an important role in how the plot ended.
You know what was that question? I think why I asked you what the question was, because I didn't want to say it before answering, but you went, how realistic was the urban environment in Full Metal Jacket? And I was unsure. I wanted to kind of ask what specifically you were talking about.
Right.
Obviously, you were talking
about... Did I not prefix it with the Battle of Hue? I thought I did.
You did, but I was more... Was it the way that they maneuvered around the city.
Is that what I said, Fred? Is that what the quizmaster said?
The urban environment. How you
Did
walk
I
through
say? Did the
urban
quizmaster say? Was it realistic how they maneuvered around it?
You know what it was? It was a very open-ended question.
It all
I
was.
was like, well, the grey clouds are realistic. So quite clearly, some of it's realistic.
It's funny as well because I sent this quiz to Fred. No, Chris.
To me beforehand. I sent this quiz
And
to
he
Fred,
still
and he
failed.
did pretty badly.
I sent it to Chris, and the one thing he said was, "Yeah, that question about the environment, not a very good question." I was like, "I'll see if I got time to change it."
Nice, that was good though. That was interesting.
So how realistic was it? It had really very realistic moments, but it wasn't.
Very interesting that it was shot in London.
Not all of it.
That scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where it was shot. It's just that scene.
Vietnam?
Nah. Yeah, so that's the end of that quiz.
Nice. I like that segment.
It was all right, wasn't it? I think next time I'll probably spend it. I don't know.
No, I think it was quite funny how ambiguous it all was.
Unfortunately, you didn't win the Mate Night token tonight, but I wanted the stakes to be high, so I set it at 8 out of 10, thinking Fred's a smart guy, and you proved me wrong.
Rubbish.
Fred's
I'm an idiot.
Fred's an idiot, and he knew nothing about Vietnam.
You needed a dumber guy for that because they wouldn't have questioned anything.
You reckon?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, listen, I reckon we're done with that segment. We've managed to buy ourselves a little bit of time. So we're going to move on to segment 3.
Yeah, let's go.
One thing I would change. We've each prepared one thing which we would change about Full Metal Jacket, which we will try to justify. Fred, you first, mate.
One change. Private Pyle doesn't freak out at the end of the first half.
Oh, Fred, I really wanted to help you out, but that's a terrible
He still freaks out
change
at the end of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's good.
This is like the one good thing about the movie. The only good thing.
All right. Go on, you tell me yours.
Well, no, you got 5 minutes, mate. Go.
Right.
Flesh it out, man.
All right, I wrote some stuff.
Go on, let's hear
I
it.
came
Let's
up
hear it.
with
I'm
this
sorry.
today.
I'm sorry.
So here was my thought. The problem is with initially I was like, what's the biggest change I could make? And I was like, no, I want the thing I would change. So what was my biggest problem with the film is what I first thought. It wasn't so much that it was split in half. It was interesting. My issue was that the split I felt made both stories feel rushed. So particularly the first section. The first section, as I said earlier, when I paused it to watch the football, I realised it was like 45 minutes, 50 minutes in. By that point, the whole of Pyle's narrative has happened. So all the stuff we spoke about in the plot section, his turn from being a child to being a sadist and a weirdo, maybe a bit of a weirdo at the start, but it all happens within a very short, confined period. And to me, rewatching it, I did know this happened, but rewatching it, I really felt like it was more of a montage than a story. Like it didn't feel quite natural. Some of the beats were just rushed. So my one change, which I haven't thought much through, so we'll see if it works, is that Pyle still goes crazy, but this is at the end of the film rather than the 45 minutes in. So he goes to war as he was going to, and the thought process behind my change would be like this. So he's gone a bit wild, still at the same point. Maybe you elongate the training session a bit so it's not quite as montagey. Mm-hmm. You have him get beaten up. You have the drill sergeant be a bully. You don't kill the drill sergeant, but you do send him out to war as now a real affected individual. Like he's changed from a child to someone with the sensibilities of a child, but the deranged mind of a bit of a killer. So let's say that he goes to war. Maybe he lands in Cowboy's squad to keep it all the same. Or if you want, you just replace Cowboy with him. So the rest of the story happens as is. Joker, when he goes out, ends up going to see Pyle and Cowboy or just Pyle. And at this point, Pyle's got a bit of a reputation. So he's like a loose cannon. He's sadistic. He's very capable, as he was shown to be near the end of his training. And I sort of compared him a bit to the helicopter man who was just going mad and just killing loads of civilians. But this is someone who Joker cares about and whose Joker has had like a mentor-mentee relationship for. So the sequences that happen still happen, but things like, you know, instead of Animal maybe going a bit wild, maybe Private Pyle's the one going wild and he's going wild to a way worse degree. For instance, when that prostitute comes and they have the scene about the prostitute comes and they all decide how they're going to, who's going to have a go on the prostitute. Instead, maybe Pyle is a bit sadistic. He takes her away and he tortures her a bit or something like that. And it comes back as things start happening. All right.
Right.
Maybe we don't need to go into detail what he does, but things start happening.
There's no need for that.
Pyle goes, he's way off the deep end. He's killing civilians. He's committing atrocities. And then instead of the kind of bit of a wet fart ending where, oh, look, we're just going into war and everyone's dying and then we're going to get into a bit of an arbitrary situation with a sniper, the completion of the arc of Pyle going way off the deep end, he ends up being like a wild dog that Joker has to put down. So he ends up, whereas before it was the teenage girl who gets killed at the end, instead now Pyle has gone through the full emotional change that he went through within 45 minutes. You're given a good 2 hours to flesh it out. You get to see him in a different setting. You get to see him mature in the wrong way. And Joker, who was shown to be the person mentoring him at the start, has to come full circle and realizes that he is the only one who's going to be able to take responsibility for this. And so the decision at the end, rather than feeling a bit like Joker decide whether he kills a girl or not, it's actually got a lot more emotional pull to it.
Do you know what, Fred? I really like that. That's great. Yeah, I actually do.
Yeah.
I'm convinced. That would have been a way better film.
I feel like
I'm getting the George and Lenny vibes, you know, which I kind of got at the start anyway. And like if they'd have lent into that and made it a more creative thing and much more kind of devastating, you know, it would have been fantastic.
I'll give you the problems with it. Like, clearly it's not, you know, crazy original, and it takes away from some of the originality of the film. Like, the originality of the film is that the first 45 minutes are pretty wild, but what I would say is you keep the wildness of the first 45 without having like the rushed character, kind of weird character piece of Pyle. You can elongate that over to the rest of the film. The second half of the film's more interesting because it's got a more interesting character
there's a
involved.
point in it.
There is a bit more of a point to the second half, in my opinion. Yeah. And while, it may be, you know, as Taylor's old as time in terms of it's been done before, it feels earned, I guess, the way it goes at the end.
No, I'm totally convinced. I think as well, like you really, you could lean really into the duality of man thing as well. You know, I tell you what, a cool thing to kind of creative it up a little more and develop it further is you could have it so that Joker kills him, as you say, but then the Stars and Stripes end up reporting him as this kind of hero.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's this kind of like absurdity of war, duality. Like Gomer goes down as this hero in history when really he's actually been this complete lunatic.
Yeah, what did it mean? You could choose whether you wanted Joker to kill him and take responsibility for the death, or maybe to kill him as an accident. But it was moral to kill him, but maybe he decides to shirk the responsibility of outright a court-martial offence. Friendly fire. Maybe he decides to make it look like it was an accident. You could also add a wrinkle like everyone knows that he's Section 8 at this point. And they refer to Section 8, I presume, as someone who's gone mad. Maybe it's clear that this guy's Section 8 has gone off the deep end, but he's clearly shown to be too competent as a killer at this point. And the higher-ups want killers. So it again plays on the running of the war machine,
the morals of it all, and
versus actually human impact. So that was my thought.
You know what, Fred? I don't even want to share mine anymore. That's so much better.
No, we got to see.
That's good. Well, it's lucky I was so nice about yours then, wasn't it?
Let's have a look at this. One change.
I had to choose one thing to change about Full Metal Jacket. So here it is. I said earlier that what I thought the story needed was a clearer driving force. So I've come up with one. What I needed was the smallest change possible. What I was hoping for was the smallest change possible, which would leave the movie largely the same, because I did truly feel that the journey that I went on had fascinating and hilarious and painful moments in all the best ways. Mm-hmm. But what the story needed was just a small tweak to provide Private Joker with a reason to go from the barracks to the military press and then to the fighting zone, which felt more intentional and tied together. Mm. This will allow the story to feel more like a story and less like life happening to Private Joker.
Okay.
And so the one thing I would change about Full Metal Jacket is I would add a tinge of macabre to Private Joker's character profile.
Okay.
Macabre is a word that I learned today.
Okay.
Which, for those unenlightened like myself this morning, means someone with a little fascination around death and morbid and blood and violence. And now, I'm not suggesting that we make him a psychopath. I'm thinking Dexter, but like 98% dialed down, right? Just a scene at the start, which shows that what drives Private Joker to join the army, then to go to the press and then go to the war zone, was something that he chose to do through a kind of curiosity. You could still explore the duality of man. And so you could argue that the defining ambivalence of Private Joker was important to the point in the film, because it kind of represents the younger generation who sort of fell into the Marines. His ambivalence was kind of a part of that. You know, he kind of needed to be for that point to be made. However, to those, I would argue that Kubrick made this point about 1,000 fucking times in every other character, and it doesn't make for a very entertaining story when your protagonist just sort of meanders around. It would give us a reason to go from A to B to C, and just give him a curiosity to explore. Cubicle. You could go from squaring him, and you could cubic him. And you could continue to lean into the duality of man theme and ask, will he become the born to kill Joker or the peace symbol Joker? And it would give me as the viewer a path to go down.
Will he put on some face paint? Will he fight Batman?
I'll try and tie it up again then, shall I? Cubic could continue to lean into the duality of man theme. Will he become the born to kill Joker or the peace symbol Joker? And it would give me as a viewer a path to go down rather than a field to aimlessly wander. So that's what I prepared.
Okay, so a darker Joker.
Yeah, and it only needed to be honest, it was more less about the darkness and more about the curiosity.
Yeah, more of a subtle change, but probably means that you get more of a version of the film certainly more similar to what it was, but with just one element of it that you really a big gripe for you.
Yeah, I think that a film for me needs a driving force, right? I've watched a film. I watched the film called The Darjeeling Limited or something the other day. Do you know the one?
I've heard of it, but
it was another film where it's very centered around characters, and it kind of just felt like meandering. Meandering always feels like a very good word for these films for me, and this was another one. And I can't enjoy those films.
Right.
I need a reason to be there. I need to be working towards something. I need to get somewhere.
Okay.
I don't care if it's an antagonist or a protagonist or an anti-hero, or I don't care who it is. Someone's got to be trying to achieve something, right? And no one was trying to achieve anything in this film. It just happened.
Right.
So just a slight curiosity to Private Joker would kind of give us something to follow.
Yeah, I guess one thing on that, though, that does, as a devil's advocate stance, is the point of war being pointless. And having characters that don't have any real reason to be there.
Sure.
Maybe is more of a comment on, maybe Kubrick's trying to comment on why are we there for war?
Yeah, 100%. But like I said, I mean, there were like 1,000 times that he hit us over the head with stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think he could sacrifice one of them to just introduce some sort of plot to this story.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, we have both given our change, and be good to see what you think. Which one?
If you comment down below if you're watching this as a video, or if I don't know how you can comment on podcasts, but if you're listening, just write in, email us. and we'll see what we come up with in future. But I'll be honest, I reckon Fred probably won that one.
I'll be interested to see what we didn't think about, because we'll be told.
We will be told, which we appreciate. Thank you. Okay, so we are now going to move on to our fourth and final segment. Yep. We do have the critical score following, but the fourth segment is called Why Full Metal Jacket is the greatest film of all time. Yeah. Now, part of the point in this section is that we weren't allowed to prepare for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why we chose that, apart from the fact neither of us had the time and couldn't be bothered, because we probably should have done. Why Full Metal Jacket is the greatest film of all time. Fred and I are going to convince ourselves that this is the greatest film of all time for fun. Fred, why is Full Metal Jacket the greatest film?
Full Metal Jacket.
Why is Full Metal Jacket the greatest film of all time? Go.
Full Metal Jacket is the greatest film of all time because it deals with themes that are as important as any other film will deal with. So the tragedy of war and the impact that that'll have both on the individual and on the group. The elements that Kubrick leans on, that we've spoken about from a theme perspective, duality of man, that's stuff that is very grounded in things that we can see on a daily basis within ourselves. So we're able to reflect with that, but he's heightened it to the point of not only the extremes of a war, so these things happening at the top echelon of human interaction, but also at a war that is very fresh in the memory for people. So the Vietnam conflict is something that people still alive today were a part of. It was affected American culture more than any other war in recent memory, and America being the leader of Western culture and the leader of creators of great films, that means that having something that's the peak of American culture in terms of a catastrophic event that caused so much impact on the American psyche of the 20th century, that means that having a film that taps into that and does it well and does it as good as any other film would make it the best film of all time.
It was presented. He got those profoundly important themes, and then he presented it with humor and tragedy, and this story, which was, I mean, the plot was just fucking brilliant from start to finish. I mean, like, I just loved the way that you went from right at the start of his journey as a Marine up until like halfway through his career as a Marine.
Yeah,
and then
a few great John Wayne impressions along the way.
And you know what, as well, I think that one of the things that he did really, really well was he made Private Joker, the protagonist, this very relatable, ambivalent character.
Yeah,
and like that kind of ambivalence made it very easy to go on the journey with him.
You know what?
He was an everyman.
Yeah, he was a Joker.
Yeah,
he was someone you could not only see yourself in. He was cool. He was kind of what people, the best part of everyman are not that they're just kind of mute characters. They are entertaining, but they're also relatable. They're the version of yourself you tell yourself you are. And then at the end, to do that, to have that figure and then make him make such a Sophie's choice of moral decisions for the Vietnam period, that really lends credence to the film, right?
Yeah. So it's got tragedy, it's got humor, it's got an everyman who just carries the film beautifully with this ambivalence, takes you on a plot, which you go from real highs to some of the greatest insults I've ever heard in my life, just rattled off one after the other, to some of the most shocking, especially if you haven't watched it before or haven't had it spoiled, right? Like myself, like if you didn't know that Gomer Pyle would go to the extent that he went to, that blew my head off. I could not believe. And
you weren't the only one whose head was blown off by that.
So, I mean, like, it touches on, and it does this fantastic story with these shocking moments over themes that matter to a lot of people today.
And it's value for money as well, because it's essentially two films in one.
Yeah. It's two films in one. Yeah. And on top of all of this, these themes are still important because there's still wars, right?
That's such a good point.
There's still wars. And so, people...
There's still suicide.
People who need to...
There's still prostitution.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, right, Fred? Right? I'm trying to make a point here. And what I'm trying to say is, I think that perhaps there is... it could be easy for people who have no exposure to the brutality of war to allow the planet to move in ways that direct towards war, right? I feel like it's difficult to really grasp how brutal war is. And when a film reminds you of that, I think that's important today. Like you need to see that. Like, it was horrific watching some of those things unfold.
Yeah, I'd argue that the greatest film of all time has to have themes. Not only it has to have themes, but has to have things that are going to have prescient relevance. And war as a genre is always going to be something until the day comes where world peace has happened.
Yeah.
Films like Apocalypse Now are going to be, I would argue, the only films
that you should ever watch.
Could be the best films of all time. Not Citizen Kane.
Not
Casablanca. Apart from the war parts of Casablanca.
Apart from the war part, you should only be watching war films for the rest of your life. Yeah, it genuinely was the greatest film I've ever watched and the greatest film of all time.
Genuinely, that was the best. You know what? How about this? Genuinely, it was the best film I've ever watched. How's that for an argument?
No, I mean...
This week, that was the best film I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, if you are okay with the gripes that I mentioned earlier, which people are, some people do not care, right? Some people are very happy to enjoy films where it really focuses around themes and characters. And less
trying to argue this is the greatest film of all time. If you're all right with things that are bad in it, it's the greatest film of all time.
If you're all right with all of the problems and everything that's wrong with it, then it is the greatest film of all time. If you only like the good bits. Yeah. Well, so there you go. So I would say that is pretty conclusively proven. Full Metal Jacket is the greatest film of all time. 6 minutes. We did pretty well there.
Good. Yeah, good.
That's pretty long for me.
Unless I'm shaking it off.
It's because you're here to help me, friend. Okay, cool. So, I mean, like, we've probably been at this for forever, and we've still got the last segment to do. So, unless you want to...
What other segments do we have?
Literally just a critical score.
Oh, yeah. Let's have a pause for one sec.
Okay.
We'll carry on.
All right. Well, we'll pause for more.
I like the segment section.
That was good fun. Right. We're going to come back in 5 minutes or so.
Cool. Are we half as good as some of the ones here?
Well, I mean, talking of, I might have prepared a little review.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't mind if you want to rattle through it a little quicker this time, because obviously we are just past the 1 hour 10-ish.
And we have to do our actual scores.
But if you'd be happy to, I'd love for you to read my review.
I'd love to read your review.
Okay, so I'll do a little introduction for us. Let me just make sure that's zoomed. Okay, so I reckon just whenever you're ready, Fred's about to read my review of Full Metal Jacket. For those listening, we've just tuned back in for part 2. He's going to start with the title, not Jambo's review, and hopefully it just works from there. We'll see.
Jambo's review.
God damn it!
Meander through Kubrick's hilarious, shocking Vietnam War classic. Great start. For me, first person, this film can be described in one sentence. A profound story with a mediocre plot. To be clear, when I refer to story, quotation marks, I mean the context, the themes, the dialogue, the characters, the humour, the music, the set designs, the costumes. Everything was freaking awesome. I know why people love this film. It was made by a genius. I really felt like I started to understand what the Vietnam War might have actually been like. It struck this equilibrium between raw reality and art, where neither diminish the other's efficacy. And when a director pulls that off, it resonates with me deeply. Nice, man. That was that was pretty up there. Yeah.
Thank you.
So all we spoke about in the first part, the whole package. You loved like the ins and outs of the
details.
The little things. They worked very well for you.
Yeah.
And yet, here we go. To me, it had no real plot. I could have left the film an hour early or an hour later, and it wouldn't have made the slightest bit of difference to me. This is because the sequence of events weren't as a result of anyone trying to achieve anything. They just kind of happened, and we were just kind of there. This had the ingredients to make one of the greatest films of all time. I think you'll find we argued that it was.
It absolutely was the greatest film of all time.
But if you ignore all of the bad parts about it, it was the greatest film of all time. But I will always struggle to truly enjoy a film where I have to meander through characters' lives with no real objective. I can see some people considering this a perfect film. Really, that is interesting that you say it, because we've spoken about perfect films before.
Yeah, I just use it much more loosely.
Okay, cool. I can see some people considering this a perfect film. If you do, by the way, please let us know. But for me, but for me, the lack of a plot which I am invested in limits this film to a maximum of 8.0. Your critical score, which is I jumped the gun a bit there. But for me, the lack of a plot which I am invested in limits this film to a maximum of 8.0, which is the score I have decided to give it, given how hard the rest of it slapped. Nice.
There you go. That's
very nice. So a very slap-worthy film. Hit that 8.0, which for you is the marker. That's the yardstick that means this film is great.
Really getting into the great films.
It just about.
Yeah, I'm not a very consistent person. So you will find 8s in my cine files, which are not things I would now go back and consider great, but that's just the way things work.
Great review, man. Really liked it. I really felt that your emphasis on the little things being good, but the plot not so much. That's consistent with what we spoke about in the first half.
It's the opposite of Casablanca, where I said it had a great driving force.
Yes.
But there were lots of problems with it.
Yeah, that's exactly
Whereas
right.
this had no driving force, but everything around it was excellent.
Which, if you remember at the time, we didn't think made any sense.
But it does make sense.
Now you look at the inverse of it. Okay, well, I think that given that's a great segue into our actual Cinephiles database.
Absolutely. So we are moving on to the the critical score section. Mm-hmm. We're going to rate Full Metal Jacket out of 10 in 7 more categories: plot, character, dialogue, performance, visuals, sound, and genre realization. Here we want to determine how good a movie was, and so we do take the age into consideration. We have 2 minutes per category. First off, plot. Plot is a sequence of events which take place in the narrative. Do they make sense? Are the stakes high enough? Were there any surprises? We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go. Are you setting a timer?
I'll do a timer this time, shall I? All right, go.
All right, go.
Plot.
Not great plot. but if you take part 1, great plot.
Great plot.
But rushed.
Rushed.
You make an excellent point that I didn't notice. Rushed.
It's all right. What comes under plot?
Can't be a good score.
All of the little stuff. No. Yes. All of the little stuff. If that comes under plot, then it's good.
No. It doesn't. It doesn't. So, and the way to distinguish it in photography or film is what I've learned is story and plot.
Right.
Plot is the sequence of events, and story is everything else. And so this section is exactly not the other things.
So even the bits which are kind of the story is good. So like the second half of the film, the story it's a story. Mm-hmm. It's got a beginning, middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. And some of the seeds that were planted in the first part are relevant to it. But it is really like just tired and generic
very naff
for a war film, right? Does it bring anything more to the table? Anything new to the table? The second half?
Second half alone, no. There is nothing there that happened that has not happened before in a...
Yeah, it was very like paint by numbers war film. The first half is
part,
original, interesting.
Okay,
but 45 minutes.
List off the plot. in the first part, you've got someone who's not appropriate for the army goes to the army. They get humiliated and bullied until they snap and then kill somebody and themselves, murder-suicide.
Yep. Okay.
That's the plot, okay? Even that, it was exceptionally well executed. But even that isn't like that new.
I don't know if it was exceptionally well executed. I think it was
rushed.
interesting.
All right. Well, I'm going to go out there and say like maybe like a 5. I don't know if I'd want to give it higher than a 5. I really just think the plot was absolutely diabolical.
All right, we'll go 5.
Yeah? All right, 5. Oh, hang on.
It's nice. We haven't had a bad one for a while.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's a film that people love as well.
You know what we need to do? Get them up so that we can see what other ones we've had.
Okay, yeah. So let's do plot A to Z. So we have rated Full Metal Jacket 5 out of 10 for plot. Fred, can you tell me where that sits? Because I can't quite see it.
We're looking at about the 5th worst. 5th worst.
What's near it? What's next to it? What other 5s are there?
Exorcist is the other 5.
Exorcist
Shocking
is the only
plot.
other 5.
No, 5. Look, 5 doesn't mean it's a stinker. 5 means it's,
Oh well, then I want lower than 5.
Nah. It's just worse than average, isn't it? It's a bit bad. 4s we had Heat and a Few Good Men and Empire Strikes Back. So it's better than those 3.
Very nice.
Nice. Okay. I reckon. Look, that's where it lands with plot.
Well, did you give the gut score 7.4?
7. Yeah, or 5. I can't remember.
I don't think it was 5.
Okay, 4.
I was thinking maybe it could have been 7.2. Okay, so moving on to. Oh my goodness, what have I just done? There we are. Right, okay, so moving on to the next section, character. Character is the collection of beings within the narrative. We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go.
So we've got a 10 out of 10 character.
We have it.
Clearly.
Do we have any real stinkers?
Right. I mean, for me, Animal Mother's a bit fucking... No, he's not a stinker, but he's just like... What's
Very
he
so-so.
No, there's not. There's not any stinkers. The only one which I reckon would be, take or leave is Pyle, because it depends if you like him or not.
But do you not think that he's a really... Okay.
I like him, but, in the same way that maybe you don't like Marlon Brando in Godfather because he's a bit fucking weird. Like, some people think that's the greatest acting of all time.
How good is the character? How good is the character?
Oh, yeah, it's not performance, it's character. Right.
Yeah.
Character then... I reckon it's a good character. I reckon the idea of it as being a man-child is good.
Yeah. So...
And it's rushed, but that's nothing to do with the character.
So I guess there's no stinkers. We got one of the greatest characters of all time. Honestly, one of my favourite characters I've ever seen in anything.
I'd say Pyle is a really good character as well.
Joker's a great character.
Joker is good. The John Wayne stuff...
Crazy keen on the cowboy guy. I thought he was a bit of a...
Yeah, I liked Cowboy. I think he was quite... Yeah, I liked when he assumed control, and he obviously had no control over the group. And I felt like it was a
interesting character.
Realistic character choice, and the way that his superiors both died.
Okay, I'm going to let you suggest this number. What are you going to go with?
I'm just looking at some of the 9s we've got. I think I'd want a high score. I think 9.
Yeah, I'd be happy with a 9.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about that drill sergeant is...
For me, the better question is what's in the 10s. You've got The Thing, Dune Part 2,
all right,
and Godfather.
I'm going 9.
Yeah, I think 9.
I think we've got to go 9.
Although I definitely think it could have gone amongst those 10s as well. Okay, cool. So the Mate Night podcast rates the characters in Full Metal Jacket a 9 out of 10. Moving on, we have dialogue. Dialogue is the line spoken between the characters. We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go.
Now, this is hard because,
Well, again, same person,
Drill
same
Sergeant
character,
is 10 out of 10 dialogue.
the best dialogue.
Oh, amongst the best of all time. Does it drag the all other dialogue up to a 10 just by being that good?
How bad is the rest of the day? For me, it's a very similar question to character.
So, for me, the dialogue is good in some parts and interesting.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's just a bit jarring. Like, yes, the tube steak into your sister was a bit weird. The scene where Animal Mother and Joker meet for the first time and they kind of square up to each other, it felt like an 80s action film, cheesy action film. It was odd.
Could that have been performance or perhaps character?
I thought it was more what was on the page.
You think?
Personally, like all the John Wayne stuff is odd. Like it's almost is it odd and that adds flavor to the film, or is it just
the question
weird?
is how good, how well made are the things on the page, like you say?
And the other element is how much was ad-libbed. We can't take away from the dialogue.
Fair enough. On the page isn't quite right.
No, I know, but do you almost think that because it was ad-libbed means it comes under performance?
That's such a good point.
Yeah, and we don't even know how much of it is ad-libbed.
But then I couldn't not give it. Like he needs
There's got to be some 10
somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think I'm going to give it a 10 for performance. So,
all right, why don't we give it a 10 for dialogue out of respect for 10 dialogue? I must say we've not had many. We've had
greatest
two
lines.
We've had Casablanca and Jaws. We've definitely got a type. We've got like a dialogue which has zingers in it.
We do, don't we? Okay, well then I'm happy with a 10. I think that there were a list of things I recognised from it.
I'd go 9, me.
All right, we'll go 9. We'll go 9. I'm sorry.
I know, and it might be hard for us to get a 10 here because he deserves it as a character. He does as a performance, as a dialogue, as something he deserves.
Yeah. But in some ways, he
Maybe
has
just
dragged all of the other scores up.
I would say, exactly that.
He's added a couple points on everywhere.
So on average wise,
he's really changed the game. For those listening, we're talking about the drill sergeant, not Gomer, and his dialogue.
Not 8 Ball.
I need help. What?
Me so horny, baby.
In fairness, I mean, like,
did you see Tangent on that bit? I remember the first time I saw that scene. I'd heard that. Me love you long time. Me so horny.
Is that from that?
Never knew where it was from. I think it's from that, yeah.
No.
I think it's from Full Metal Jacket. That's the originator of...
You know what, man?
Me love you long time.
It almost feels wrong to give this anything other than a 10 for dialogue just because of how
iconic it is.
Like, it's changed. Nobody has come out with such a long list of, like, influential lines like that.
It's petty, but the reason why I'm sticking with 9 is because there are some things which I was just like, that wasn't particularly... I didn't really like what was on the page.
Yeah, it felt cheap.
And the ad-libbing section, like, if he's made it up, it should go under performance. That should be an element of it.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have the same problem with performance, but
all right,
I don't think there's a very good... Yeah, next we have performance. We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go.
All right, performance is... All right, Drill Sergeant again, 10 out of 10.
Just carries the film.
I liked Joker as well.
I like Joker. Performance was good. Yeah.
You didn't like Pyle.
Didn't like Pyle.
Here's what I'd say on performance, though, right? He is in a ridiculous situation. Like, he has been asked to behave like a child, and he has quite clearly. You saw when he was copying Joker's mannerisms, when Joker is actually teaching him himself, and he's doing it. He looks like a kid doing it. It just looks ridiculous. But I feel like it's clearly an element of direction for, we want you to do it in this way.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I mean, no, yeah, it could be.
I'm saying it's a hard job.
If a director says behave like a child, then that's kind of on the director. But for me, still, that it just felt ridiculous. Like, it just felt so stupid. The way
I think I'm more saying give him a bit of. Personally, I give him a bit of leeway because I think it's a really hard job to do that and do it well.
Who cares? We're rating the performance. If it's okay. Well, let's move on from Gomer. What else is there?
We've got 5 seconds, so I reckon just snap.
Anything
5.
else significance? Anything else at all?
What are you thinking? 9?
I don't.
Got a lot of 8s. All right, you know what? Here we go. Here's one for you.
Yeah.
Were the performances better or worse than Apocalypse Now?
It's just for me, it's just so split between the drill sergeant and everyone else.
Excuse me. May I make a request then that we go with 9 out of respect again for the drill sergeant?
I'm going with 8.
Because we've given him no 10. Fair enough.
I'm going with 8.
That's fine.
It's an 8. They're just with the animal mother and with Goma. Yeah, it was a tough
The
role.
minute you said
but
8, I was like, yeah, I suppose Animal Mother was...
it was very
meh,
and even Cowboy. I was like, I just felt like
I quite liked Cowboy's performance, but
okay, cool. So we are now moving on to the areas which we have the least expertise in.
visuals.
So, next, we have visuals, CGI, costume, and makeup, and cinematography. I've got 2 ands in this list. We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go.
Visuals. So in visuals, we also kind of include direction, things like that. So shot selection, cinematography.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about, so we just
No. So how did it make you feel visually?
Okay, well, personally, I think that it scored very high in visuals.
Cool.
I felt like the Vietnam was not portrayed as this cool, stylized place. It felt like an actual active war zone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. London.
I felt like the boot camp felt very real. I learned a couple of cool cinematography things that happened in there. So they actually went out of their way to get a lens which managed to get every soldier's face in focus during the drill sergeant training bits during the boot camp as a sort of all of these units are the same. They are all equal. No one person is in focus and one not. So there's kind of some creativity
cool.
going on there, which I thought was quite cool.
And tied into their shaving of the head right at the start. These are all the same person. They only really get personalities in the second half. That's interesting.
So did it have visuals which I'll never forget? No. But the visuals were definitely good.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, for me, it's a question of whether it gets into the 8s.
What's that 7 that we've got there? Chinatown.
Yeah, looks like it, yeah.
We've got a lot of 8s.
No, we haven't. We've got 4.
Okay, we don't have a lot of 8s.
Heat, Exorcist, Crouching Tiger, Godfather.
I'd probably say 7, you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Cool.
Oh, we finished one early.
It does often happen around this part of the
Stuff that we...
I think usually what happens is I bring up one fact that I managed to find online about cinematography, and then we kind of go, yeah, 8. Okay, so moving on to sound. I'm going to go that way. So, have I got anything prepared for sound? Next, we have sound. We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating out of 10. Go.
I thought when I was listening to this, actually, I was like, God, this is going to be a tough one to work out sound, because I was so ambivalent towards it.
Do you know what? I was quite looking forward to saying something there because I couldn't remember any sound stuff. No, actually, that's not true. There were some songs where I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm getting the idea here. This is what you're going
they had
for.
like...
The Bird song, which was just fucking hilarious. That's the first time I've ever heard that song not sung by Peter Griffin.
Yeah, that one, I know, was out of place. Rachel was watching it and being like, is that...
It's that thing they keep doing where it's like, oh, yeah, we do Absurdity of War.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, well, that's
There's
original.
That. I know, it was... I think the mix between... Cool. I felt like, you know how I've spoken to you about having a soundtrack versus having a score? Yep. It almost felt like halfway through they added a soundtrack. So the first shot from when they go into the second part is it that Nancy Sinatra song?
I can't remember, but I do remember there being another song that was good.
Yeah. It's a good... It's something like that.
His boots are made for walking.
Yeah, that was it.
That was so cool. That.
So but he's very like... This is a song from a Vietnam War film.
There were just like 2 songs, just like putting the film, and it was kind of nice to have a moment.
It was like, that's fine.
Where something interesting happened.
Was there anything? 6, 7, 6.
Okay, so 7 is average.
Yeah.
6 for me, I think when I put something in 6, I'm like, it's not good. Like it's starting to get into the bads. If it's a 6, it's like I'm not happy really. Not going to be brutal, but...
It's so hard to get a bad score in sound, I'd say.
Well, what might bring it up? The drill sergeant singing.
Yeah.
And there was the Mickey Mouse singing at the end as well,
Yeah,
which was kind of important.
To be honest, the chanting scenes are pretty good. Oh, it's got to be a 7 though.
All right, we'll stick it in 7 then. All right.
Good time.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so moving on to our last category of critical score. Genre realization. Neither of us really have ever understood this one, but we think it's something like, how does it compare against the rest of its genre? We have 2 minutes to agree on a rating. Out of 10, go. Okay, so I actually saw 2 classifications for this film.
Yeah.
Vietnam War film.
That's a very specific classification.
There's actually quite a lot of films that come under that, Fred.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
And then Vietnam War satire.
How many Vietnam War satires are there?
Probably all of them. Ooh,
Well,
absurdity of war. Oh, I'll try that, shall I? Wonder if anyone's thought of that before. Apocalypse Now, 8 years ago.
Well, there can't be many. Yeah, Vietnam.
It's not as good as Apocalypse Now, and it's definitely in the same genre.
Did I think I gave it a better score than Apocalypse.
Apocalypse Now, you gave
7.1.
gut score
7.0.
7.0, and then you gave 7.4 for Full Metal Jacket. Have I put these in the wrong sides?
But I would say then that we usually give a 10 for this, for the classic films.
How is it? Because we used to say how genre defining, how iconic, and now we're more sort of like, how does it compare to the rest of its genre, which are different.
but I'd say for the classic films, more genre defining, right? I should have pressed start on the timer. This is, as war films go, this is, let's say it's a 10 for genre defining. Would you agree?
No,
You wouldn't.
well, it came quite late. You know, this is 8 years after Apocalypse Now did the same thing but with a plot.
I think it's just at the threshold of great war film.
Genre defining, if you can, which often I can't, you got to try and remember like kind of roughly what order it came in. It's not like it really did anything new. It didn't define the genre. You know, like we spent a lot of time talking about how little it actually brought new to the table and defined a new genre behind it.
Okay. But the big thing it did bring you, the drill sergeant thing, was very new. It's just the second half.
Well, yeah, okay. I don't know. Would you consider the
I would say the
Napalm
first
in the Morning guy to be kind of a bit of a drill sergeant character, just done to a very different style?
Nah, I wouldn't. I'd say
very unique.
Yeah, he's a character.
Wasn't like Full Metal
but
Jacket.
yeah, the drill sergeant being that up close and personal to the experience of a Marine going through basic training.
Okay, so but I suppose genre defining isn't really the question anymore, is it?
Genre realizing.
How much does it realize?
How much does it? It's very war-y.
It's a lot of. It's not that much war.
No, it's not that much war. Certainly, it's not very
But I
war-y.
suppose boot camp kind of counts.
Yeah, I suppose that's quite.
What about
war-y.
being in a press office at war?
No, Tet Offensive though. That's pretty.
That's quite war.
That's pretty
And
war-y.
it's definitely quite Vietnamese.
Apart from the scenes shot in London.
Apart from the scene shot in London and on Paris Island.
Yeah. So it's not that Vietnamese.
So it's not that war-y. It's not that Vietnamese. But it has the drill sergeant. So we're going to give it a 9.
Right. I think if we've learned anything from this scoring, it's that
Everything gets a
anything to
10.
do with the drill sergeant is a 9.
9?
Go on, 9.
All right, okay.
Let's see where it ends up as.
I think it will do okay.
Do quite well. We're getting the 8s,
That's
won't it?
my hot take. Okay, so we have. Hang on, I've actually might have prepared something for this. Oh, so
Ooh.
okay, so the Mate Night podcast has now rated Full Metal Jacket out of 10 in 9 different categories using the Mate Night system. We have ranked it the following: Fred 7.4 out of 10 for enjoyment, Jambo 8.0 out of 10 for enjoyment. We have then jointly agreed 5 for plot, character 9, dialogue 9, performance 8, visual 7, sound 7, genre realization 9, which brings it to an average score, a very useful word for this, of 7.71.
That is good.
That is a very average film.
middle of the road.
What did
Missionary
you think of Full
position.
Metal Jacket? Missionary.
according to the Mate Night, Full Metal Jacket, with a score of 7.71, is the 11th greatest film of all time.
Which
until
puts it-
further notice.
I'm so sorry. We're going to have to wait till next week to hear that properly. I'm so sorry.
No, it's funny.
Which puts it one place behind Casablanca, the 10th greatest film of all time, and one place ahead of Heat, the 12th greatest film of all time. Until further notice.
Until further notice. Until further
notices. Okay, cool. So, anything else you'd like to say, Freddie?
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks so much for listening, Dave. And thank you to
Rachel.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
for listening, because you will listen all the way through. I know you.
I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Lavender.
Lavender will probably be part
She
of it.
did not enjoy Full Metal Jacket.
Does she have any useful feedback?
She stomped.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, Dave. Over and out.
See you later.